Hey everyone, I'm Clue. So this video compilation, I think is a better term for it, is going to be a little bit different, right? So to end off the year, basically, it's an insight to my brain, if you will. So when I go to record a topic, right, I go through, I open up all the relevant tabs that I want to talk about, and then I just record. Right? I don't have a script, I don't follow anything, I just have an initial thought or idea, a topic that I want to discuss, and I just ramble, right? I let my thoughts wander, and I talk about whatever comes to mind. And what this generally creates is videos that I don't release, right? Generally, with any given topic, I'll record maybe 5-6 times, and throw out all but one, right? The one that makes the most sense. I don't edit, I don't splice them together, right? I just go for the most cohesive or the one that is most on topic with what I want to say. But instead, today, I'm going to give you my ramblings from all the iterations of this video, right? And you can see that they do go off on very different tangents, but hopefully it's interesting nonetheless. But I also do want to sort of preface it, right? I am overwhelmed. What I record in relation to Flesh and Blood hasn't been all that fun to me, right? I am not here for the competitive side of things, but obviously the competitive aspect of the game has grown the largest, right? I got into Flesh and Blood off of the collectability and the prospect of PvE. Those were the two things that drew me to the game, right? The strategy and the fun design of the gameplay was secondary. Now, obviously, again, the development of the game has gone heavily towards the competitive aspect. So talking-wise, that's the majority of what there is to talk about. And again, I just feel burnt out and overwhelmed in relation to that, because again, it's not something that I have a vested interest in. I'm almost forcing myself to be interested in it just so I stay involved, right? I stay up to date until the actual factors, parts of the game that I really want to see come to light. And simply put, we don't know when that is, right? Collectability has continued to dwindle, right? I doubt with the unsuccessful attempt at, serialized cards in Dusk Till Dawn, we will see a big push towards collectability, right? PvE is on the back foot for another year, so that is always a disappointment. And again, we're left with a year devoted to sort of correcting the problems of the past, right? And that's basically where my mind has been when trying to record this video. And yeah, so I just wanted to give you all of it. So listen to any parts you want, listen to it all. Hope you enjoy. See you in the new year. Also, sorry, one more thing. Take every discussion in this video with a grain of salt. Right? Again, these are footage that I wouldn't necessarily use. I don't think any of them perfectly convey what I'm trying to get across completely. It's aspects of all of them, but again, usually I would retake it until I have a video that I am happy with, that I think concisely conveys the points that I am trying to make. So my actual point probably lies somewhere in the middle of all of these different takes. I just thought, to give a little perspective into the way I operate, the way I think, and the way I approach these videos could be, well, interesting. I hope you do find it interesting. Well, you can probably guess what we're going to be talking about today, right? Given the post on screen, and of course, probably the title of the video. But before we jump into all that, there is something else I want to just discuss a little bit first, right? And we'll probably go a bit more in depth into what I'm about to say, right, in the follow-up video. But yeah, today we'll primarily focus on Stravo, but it's also essentially what Stravo, the Living Legend format, debacle, and all that has brought out in me, right? This is the third time where I've sat down to record a video on a specific topic of Flesh and Blood, and I've had the same sort of mindset. And this mindset isn't overtly positive, right? It's pretty pessimistic towards the game, and it's just not a collection of thoughts I really want, right? But they are still the thoughts that I'm having towards the game. Now, to preference it, right? I'm not a competitive person. If you asked me a few years ago the direction Fab was heading and what I expected to see, in a year or 2 year, right? What we have nowadays, where the game is heading nowadays, is not the flesh and blood I envision. Now, that doesn't mean that what is happening with the game isn't fantastic. What LSS are doing isn't fantastic. It just means that what I wanted to see and what I was looking forward to, right, hasn't eventuated. In fact, it almost feels that every day, every year, every release, we're getting a step further away from the core ideals that drew me towards the game. So for me personally, it was the trifecta of ideas, the collectability aspect, the, of course, competitive aspect, but then also the camaraderie aspect, right? And these were clearly defined how they were going to be encapsulated, right? The collectability aspect was going to come from the first edition Unlimited Edition model, along with cold foils. That has pretty much collapsed, right? Cold foils, unless they're impactful towards the game, are not collectible cards. Just put frankly, they might be rare, they might be hard to pull, they might be, scarce, but they are not collectible cards in the general aspect or conception of collectible. Yes, you can hold on to them. One day they might be worth something, but their place within the community and within the game has dwindled day by day, and they are going to get worse and worse unless, of course, something was done about it. Then we have, of course, the competitive aspect, which has shined the greatest amongst the game, right, and has led us down this pathway and the thoughts and ideas that we've been exploring in these discussion videos. And then, of course, we have that third aspect that, again, I personally feel has dwindled and dwindled. Now, right, the competitive side of the game, yes, it brings people together. Yes, it is a fun situation and event for you to meet people, for you to play with people, for you to just enjoy like-minded people who enjoy the game Flesh and Blood. But for me, the big camaraderie aspect of Flesh and Blood was always going to be PvE, right? Day one, PvE. It's in the works. We want to make it perfect. This and that. Push back. Another year. And again, personally, I'm not a competitive person. I'm not someone who wants to, net deck or pick a specific hero and master it perfectly, right? So that I win the majority of my games. I am here to have fun. And one of the biggest aspects that drew me to the game was the prospect of PvE. I was big into the World of Warcraft TCG. So I was expecting, again, something similar. A lot of the main concepts from that have been floated as to how Flesh and Blood will do PvE. But again, that is all just on the back foot. And there's nothing wrong with that. Again, it's just the fact that Flesh and Blood is heading in a direction that is not necessarily the direction I want to go. Now, I'm not saying I'm done with Flesh and Blood. I'm not saying that I'm done, opening packs, collecting games, enjoying sets. But my interest in the game is definitely dwindling day by day when we see the sole focus grow and grow towards, again, the competitive aspect, which is wonderful and fantastic, don't get me wrong, but it's not something that I have a vested stake in, right? I don't go to competitive events. I don't strongly follow competitive events. Yet here at the same time, that's all I have to talk about, right, on my channel in terms of Flesh and Blood, because that's the only real bit of information we get. Everything is, again, directed towards competitive events. Now, it is interesting, but it is slowly losing its interest to me because, again, these thoughts and feelings that I'm having are just criticism, right? Criticism about the game and the direction, and I can't tell if it's constructive or if it's personal opinions, again, with me being, again, not completely on board with the direction that the game is going. So I don't know. I'm in a weird place, right, with what I want to talk about. Because, again, I still find the concepts fascinating. Everything that LSS has done for the game is fascinating because they are new things, right? The Living Legend system, new. The character design, the way the game is designed, the mechanics, right? They're all these fresh concepts that are interesting and entertaining. But again, at the back of my mind, I just want to see how they do PvE, right? I just want these cool, masterful pieces of artwork that have these awesome finishes to collect. But I also want that collection to be meaningful. And it doesn't feel meaningful. It feels like, again, everything is on the back foot while the competitive side of the game is very much at the forefront. And personally, that's not something that, again, I have a huge interest in. So it feels conflicting because why do I want to talk about these things, right? What is really drawing it? Is it just patience? Is it just something to do and occupy my time until these aspects of the game come out? Again, it's just this weird place for me. And I will admit, this intro to the video is also weird, right? Because, again, I had a core concept that I wanted to talk about, right, in relation to Stravo. But then it's I guess this video is more so about the feelings that this invokes rather than that principal idea that I was going to talk about. So I guess it's not a Stravo video, right? I guess it's not really in relation to this post or in relation to whatever, well, I suppose it should be in relation to whatever I titled the video. But it is just a weird time for me personally and my view of Flesh and Blood. Again, the collectible aspect slowly dwindled. I'm not saying Flesh and Blood isn't collectible, but I am definitely saying that is not one of the primary goals, right? Again, from a company perspective, it's fully understandable. The competitive element is the strongest element of the game, so it is worthwhile to pour everything into it. But the systems that they created and the concepts that they were trying to make work just haven't. Because, again, there are just so many variables, so many inconsistencies to Flesh and Blood that it is really hard to go into it and have these plans, have these course of actions, but then everything just goes a bit wonky. Because, again, the road is just so windy for Flesh and Blood that we will get there eventually. I'm sure of it, right? We will eventually see PvE. We'll eventually see, more collectability to the game. But it's just the weird detours that are on the way. And again, I don't know how I feel towards it. I'm not a competitive person. I'm not here to really just play competitively. I will have fun with decks that I want to have fun with. But at the end of the day, win or lose, it's just about enjoying the game and its mechanics rather than, well, winning or losing, which puts me in a weird place because, again, everything seems so focused on the competitive elements. And I don't know how I want to approach things going forward. If I want to continue talking about concepts and ideas that, again, I don't really have a stake in, they're interesting to me because they are, they are examples and showcases of where a wonderful idea, a wonderful concept can go so astray because of the weird variables that do pop up, right? I don't think LSS are at fault. Again, they're doing the best with what they have. And I utterly respect what they're doing with the game and everything they have developed. It's just that, again, personally, it doesn't resonate with me like the game once did. And it's just not a great sentiment to have, right? The number one rule for me with this channel is I will only do things that I find fun and interesting. I don't want to just do things because I feel I have to, because that's the videos that I've built up, and that therefore that's what everyone wants to see, right? I've been covering the concept sides of Flesh and Blood for a while, so I feel like I had to continue, I suppose. But again, it's a weird place, right? I don't know if I'm doing it again just to buy time and make myself, force myself to be interested in these topics and these parts of the game until I finally get what I really want. And even worse, right? I've had a solid concept for PvE. I've been doodling, I've been figuring out, I've been planning, and I keep pushing that back because there's just other videos for me to make and talk about. And yeah, it's weird. I have no other words for it. I've just lost my place in what I want to do. My number one prerogative is this is treated as a hobby. And therefore, it should be fun. It should be relaxing. It should be my escape. And talking about these topics, right? They were interesting at first, but again, it's hard to toe that line. Is it because I'm interested in it, or because I want something to be interested in until I get the things that I am actually interested in? So I don't know what I'm going to do in the new year, right? I guess this is the video to end off the year, right? I think I'll leave it to that. I'll re-record it and I'll do a proper video on the topics that I wanted to cover initially in this video. But yeah, going forward, I will still open boxes. I will still play. Again, I'm here to just have fun with goofy decks. I'm not here to try and necessarily win, but covering all the discussion and all these changes and this direction of the game, I don't know if it has a place for me, because I don't know if I want to have a place with it. It's just weird. It's not feelings that I want to have, to put frankly. Well, that didn't go the way I expected. Hope you liked some confusion, because I'm probably going to put this one out before the one I just recorded. Funny enough. So basically I sat down to do this video, and my train of thought derailed, and we started talking about some other stuff, and I do just want to summarize it, right? So that video will be a bit more raw, if you will. Basically, I have had the feelings of burnout towards this aspect of Flesh and Blood for quite a while now, right? And I don't think going forward I will be covering these aspects of the game, right? The competitive aspects, the points of discussion, and the concepts LSS are trying to make work, right? I don't know if I have the vested interest in it as much as I once did. And again, first and foremost, this is a hobby to me, so I'm going to do what I find fun and interesting, not what I feel I need to continue for the sake of what I have done previously on my channel. Right, that weird, confusing intro out of the way. Hi, I'm Clue. So you can probably guess what we're going to talk about. Strava, yes. But more together, I want to talk about the overall concepts that LSS have tried to make work for the game, and they just simply don't, and they simply won't, right? Strava is a clear example of that, right? So Living Legend format, I think this is probably the main crux, right? Or, you know, we should probably talk about the concepts overall. So we have the Living Legend format, we have the Living Legend system, we have their own reprint policies, we have also first edition, unlimited edition, that whole model that crumbled, right? There have been a multitude of concepts that LSS have floated, that LSS have tried to redesign and done wonderfully, right? Conceptually, they have been beautiful, they've been immaculate, but then their actual implementation, right, has been the best that it could have been, but they were always doomed to fail, because these concepts, while again being these cool, great, fascinating concepts that again conceptually seem wonderful, in practicality they have a numerous amounts of variability that leads to, well, everything that has been happening and everything that we have been discussing. So in relation to the Living Legend format, we have Strava, right? And so the main concept, to me at least, again, open to interpretation, as we've seen, right? Whether you think it should be dominated by one hero, dominated by a handful of heroes, every hero that hits LL should be playable to some degree. Here's what I interpret conceptually from this, right? Again, not every hero that meets Living Legend will be able to have a go, will be able to contend, right? But it was meant to have continuous shake-up. Okay, so heroes LL from Classic Constructed, they hit Living Legend, they have a blast, they fight one another, the top dog comes out, and it was meant to be this concept where, you know, a handful of heroes from this era come out, a handful of this era come out, and they never got to meet each other in Classic Constructed, but now here they are in Living Legend, where they can contest and see who truly is the strongest of their season. Now, what made this fall apart was the rates in which heroes were introduced, right? Bravo, introduced in Everfest, strongest contender against, sorry, not Bravo, you know what I mean, Strava, right? There's only one Bravo in Living Legend, technically it is Bravo, but the strongest contender against him, right? Prism, Oldhim, Icelander, where are these all from? They are all from the sets before Strava. They all existed before Strava. Yes, they've seen a handful of new cards. Yes, they've seen some new ideas and new versions of their decks. But altogether, these aren't new matchups. Bravo kicked their asses once, and he's kicking their asses again. Okay? So we don't have that whole system where Bravo dominated his season, this hero dominated their season, and now they get to duke it out, and we can finally see which one is truly the Living Legend. That was the concept that was meant to work for me. That is a concept that they, to me, are still trying to encapsulate through the point changes, through the addition of numerous heroes, right? This whole idea that they want a handful to cycle out, to fight in Living Legend, then a new handful to cycle out, and then fight each other. right? That's my interpretation of what they strived for with the Living Legend system. Again, doesn't have to be the best, but it is still this system of this new contender shows up and they try against this renowned titan to see who really is the top. And that just won't work for a simple reason. Bravo. Bravo and everything that has come before him. Again, Bravo dominated the majority of decks. The majority of decks that we will see hit Living Legend have already existed in matchups in Classic Constructed. So there was nothing new for Bravo to face. There was nothing new to challenge him. Any heroes that are now introduced, right, are still 8 months to a year, 2 years away from challenging Bravo. And even then, with the current power level of the game, right, the refinement and the overall balancing, no hero is going to come close to touching Bravo. Again, if we look at the points, who's closest to cycle out? Faye, new contender, but not a playstyle that would have ever worked against Bravo. Dromai, who else is new, right? Uzari, right? If any point these LL, doesn't matter. Because, again, we have that gap, right? People have tried these decks against one another. People have thought about it and tested, and they know that they don't stand up to Bravo. So again, in the coming year, when we see Faye, LL, when we see Dash, LL, if we see Dromai or normal Bravo, LL, they're going to come across Bravo, and they're going to have no place in the Living Legend format. We're going to see an addition of 15 new heroes come out, right? Again, we're going to expect them to take 8 months to 2 years to enter the Living Legend format. In which case, again, despite the interest or the wants of the format, again, to show off these battles, these matches, people will have the knowledge, have the ability to test and try these concepts, these decks, and it is just not going to matter. Again, the only foreseeable solutions are either Bravo is brought down or a hero is built up to be a contender against Bravo, in which case they become a contender against every other hero because they will have, again, the similar dominance as Bravo. So the Living Legend format, conceptually fantastic, but it will never have an impact like it should, because nothing it generates, nothing really matters unless it had some other level of uniqueness to it, something that forced these matchups. Doesn't matter how many heroes, personally, right? This, again, it's all my personal judgment and opinion. Doesn't matter how many heroes come out of the woodworks, how many get cycled out. When the dominance is this great, when everything is just being contended against the one hero, then it doesn't matter. It's the matchups we never expect. It's the matchups that we never would think of that would generate interest within the Living Legend format. One of these new 15 heroes going against Chain, right, being the oldest hero here. That could be of interest. But again, we have Bravo, star of the show, the only person in the spotlight, just completely blocking the way for every other hero who comes to the Living Legend format. Again, conceptually, seems awesome, could work, but what is the actual point to it, especially with Bravo? Well, here we are again. Strava, right? The center of a lot of discussion going on lately with Flesh and Blood and the Living Legend format. But I want to go a little bit broader than just Stravo. So Dice Commando pointed out a very, very great train of thought, right? And that is the disconnect towards the Living Legend format between what people think it is, what they want it to be, and what it is because of all the different practices in place, right? The heroes that are available, the cards that are available, and of course the power differences between those heroes. So that disconnect, again, from our personal interpretation of what the Living Legend is to what we think it should become, and then of course what it has to be because of, well, all the factors that are in play. And those three ideas create the multitude of problems with the Living Legend system. And then, of course, the other issue is, well, what do LSS want it to be? Are they going to do anything to correct it, to reshape it into, again, what they think it should be? Or are they going to let it lie with what it has become? Because, again, of all the factors that are in play with it currently, right? Like Stravo. So what this has led me to really think about is overall the concepts that LSS have put forward, that LSS have created for Flesh and Blood, right? Because, again, Flesh and Blood is a unique creation, right? There are many concepts and practices for Flesh and Blood that are unique to Flesh and Blood. But the issue then stems that they are new, that they are great concepts, but due to the inexperience, don't necessarily work as well as they might when put into practice. And I think the Living Legend system is a prime example of that, right? Had we started from scratch, knowing everything that we know now, right? Of course, we could make a significantly better Living Legend system if you were to exclude every single hero currently that has LL'd. Do I have the two? No, I don't. I just haven't scrolled down, right? So if we got rid of everyone that has LL'd, then we'd probably see something closer or more in line to what, again, we think the Living Legend format should be, right? Again, a power struggle where there are dominant heroes over everyone else. But we don't see that. What we see is one hero who, again, because of these concepts not being worked out, not being ever put into practice first, shines significantly brighter than everyone else around him, and now acts as a gatekeeper of the format. So again, either Bravo is brought down a peg, or some hero is built up to fight him, in which case that hero will absolutely dominate everything else in the game, right? It is very clear that Bravo is an outlier, and just whether or not that outlier gets factored into what the Living Legend format is, or gets removed so that the Living Legend format can be reshaped into what we think it should be, or what LSS think it should be. Now, personally, my interpretation of the Living Legend format is this. It is the format where not every hero can shine, right? We get that. Again, depending on when a hero LLs, it might not stand up to the other heroes that have come before it. But at the same time, it is still a point at which we can see these different matchups, where we can see these different contests of strength, where this hero that LL'd in this season comes up against this newer hero, and they actually can fight it out with a certain degree of difficulty, right? They are the best of their generation. So we want to find out who is the best between them. And the issue stems that, well, Bravo. When did Bravo come out? Bravo is from Everfest, right? Where is everyone else from? All the sets prior to Bravo. So we already know that Bravo is significantly stronger than any of these decks, right? Yes, they've gotten new cards over the years, but Bravo dominated them once, and Bravo is dominating them again. And then even in the case of the new heroes, right? If Faye LLs, if Dromai LLs, right? Are they going to stand a chance against Bravo? Well, truth be told, people already know, because we already have access to try these things out. The amount of cards needed to create the variability in the Living Legend system, right? To create the ability for X hero to now be power crept and actually a contender against Bravo is just something that isn't going to be done by LSS in the foreseeable future, right? That's not the direction they're going. They're not revisiting these sets and re-supporting these heroes so that they can stand a better chance, right? Their concept that they're running with is they're going to try and win with quantity over quality. And here's the thing. We get 15 new heroes. If those 15 new heroes are slotted into the current balancing of the game, then it doesn't matter when they are out, right? They might be a new, fun, interesting matchup for Bravo. Unless they're power creeped to Bravo, or Bravo is again brought down, we already know the outcome, right? Because Bravo is such an outlier. They either have to dominate this iteration so that they can then, have an impact on the Living Legend format, which would be horrible balancing, right? To release another hero like Bravo, another hero that eclipses the point system and gets taken out of play quickly because of its power, it would just be absurd. But overall, I think this strongly reflects, right, the design choices of Flesh and Blood. There have been fantastic concepts floated, but they are new concepts that LSS have done their best to implement. They've tweaked them and they've rebalanced them and redesigned them so that they work better. But the problem is, the folly of everything that's come before them still exists. I personally think if every hero here, currently LL, was taken out, we would have what most of us expect the Living Legend format to be, right? When the new heroes of this generation, of this more balanced era, eventually LL, then we'd have a top contender that could openly be contested when another hero hits LL, right? When another of these new 15 heroes LL. It would be a lot more open for interpretation to whether or not you expect one of these new heroes to perform as well or better than whatever hero is currently dominating the Living Legend format. We want a push and pull, right? It doesn't have to be every hero involved, but we want a push and pull between a handful of heroes, not just one. And again, there is no clear sign when we are going to get that, because the current iteration of balancing and tweaks is bring everyone down, which just seems absurd, right? The main changes to Bravo affect Icelander, affect Alden, and that just personally seems absurd. Why? Why would you do that, right? Why? What is the point? If this is meant to reduce the consistency of Bravo, the dominance of Bravo, then why not do something specifically to Bravo? It doesn't need to be banned, doesn't need to be errated, but if Bravo in itself, the deck in itself, is restricted, you still have a pilot for Guardian cards. You still have a pilot for all the elemental cards. So it's not like you're taking those cards out of play. It's not like they're no longer able to be utilized in the Living Legend format. But instead, you're just hampering Bravo's deck, right? Bravo's specific deck. And I think that personally would preserve some of the ideas of the Living Legend format. Now, in relation to, the plethora of heroes that are going to come out, right? So 15 new heroes. Well, it's going to take 8 months to a year, 2 years to cycle them out, right? Unless, again, the mentality of LSS has drastically changed. This coming season, right, we'll see, maybe Faye, Dash, and Dromai leave play, but none of the new heroes. Again, the only way they would LL within this year, this coming year, is if they are broken. And that just would not be great for a balancing aspect, right? That would just be insane for them to actively print a hero that LLs that quickly to just, say, contest with Bravo, because that wouldn't be healthy for Classic Constructed, the main principal format of the game. So, again, even if by whatever chance one of these heroes is a direct counter to Bravo, it's still a good year away before it has an impact on the Living Legend format. Conceptually, the Living Legend format seems fantastic. It seems so cool. But in practice, it is not going to work because it is plagued by everything that has been tested and built up to this point. And that is the same scenario for a lot of the other systems that LSS has come up with, right? Well, here we are again. Stravo, right? Center of a lot of discussion lately because he is just, well, depending how you look at it, a nuisance or the pinnacle of the game, right? Now, Dice Commander on the previous discussion video had a very, very good line of thought. Right, we'll read the whole comment. So, I honestly believe a lot of the disconnect comes in what players want / believe Living Legend format to be versus what it basically has to be. It's not a place where all heroes are playable. It functionally can't be. There will always be some subset of heroes that eclipse other subset of heroes. If everything has to remain legal, which again is what players want, then players will get what they don't want, which is the dominant heroes dominating. Combine that with the admitted fact of the downpowering of Fab right now, and doesn't that just mean that the Living Legend format is today what it will be forever? To your well-made points, the only way to catch back up in LL is power creep, and that's not something I think we really want. It creates a hell of a bad situation. Now, right, what, again, I want to zero in on, just like with the Living Legend blurb, is heroes, right? Heroes. But it's not. And this is the big issue. Stravo is such a clear outlier, right? I think we'd all be a lot happier if it was heroes, right? If there was a push and pull, a struggle at the top for the heroes that have made it to Living Legend. Now, fully agree, not every hero needs to have a place in the Living Legend format. There will be weaker seasons, there will be stronger seasons, but it's this concept that even LSS have pushed with the Living Legend format, right? For a new contender to come out to try and take out the renowned Titans. This hero LL'd in this season. This hero just came out this year and has LL'd next year, the year after, right? And now they get to face off and they get to truly define who is the living legend. That is the concept that I think a lot of us want, right? We want that push and pull. We want some level of competition. But yeah, it is very clear, especially with James White's responses, which again, to me, are very short-sighted. If he wants Stravo to just be where he is now, then that's all we will have for the Living Legend format. The Living Legend format that it is today will be exactly what it is forever. The new heroes that come out don't matter, right? 15 coming out this year. They take 8 months to 2 years to hit Living Legend. Doesn't matter. We already know that they aren't going to stand up to Bravo, right? The only way for them to stand up to Bravo is if they power creep. And if they power creep, they're not good for Classic Constructed, and Classic Constructed is the central format of the game. So that would just be a bad decision overall by LSS. Now, here's the other take, right? We can get a enormous number of cards so that all these other heroes one day have a chance. What's the issue with that? Timing. How long is it going to take to revisit these heroes? To them print, X block of cards that are enough of an advantage to these heroes that they then can contest with Bravo, right? Heavy hitters, probably not going to do it, considering, again, these are all Elemental / Monarch, which has already been revisited, and both Prism and Chain, their new iterations, are departures from what they originally were. So we already know that, from a design aspect, if we were to see a second iteration of these heroes, they're probably going to be different, right? They're probably going to utilize their cards in a different way, and it's probably going to be that any cards that come out while supporting the new decks, while maybe adding a little bit to these older decks, aren't going to have the impact needed to usurp Bravo. And even if they did, again, how long is it going to take to cycle back through every single hero to increase the toolkit of every single hero? Again, the concepts, the design of Flesh and Blood, they don't match up. I've always thought the concepts LSS have pushed and the ideas they've thought up have been fantastic, right? But then their actual practicality rings true. What we want is just not feasible. There are way too many consistencies and community variables to these great concepts of Flesh and Blood that create these dynamics, these situations. We now see this huge pivot, right? Where LSS wants quantity to some degree over quality, right? Quality in the scope of power scale, right? But we're getting 15 new heroes. That's wonderful for Classic Constructed. And it's meant to have a knock-on effect to Living Legend. But it's just not. It's not going to have any impact whatsoever. Doesn't matter if Fate hits Living Legend next year. It doesn't matter if Dash or Dromite. We already know they're not going to stand up to Bravo. Bravo is just such a clear outlier, right? Every other hero in Living Legend came out before Bravo. So it is very clear that Bravo is dominant. Bravo dominated them when he came out, and of course he's going to dominate them now, right? Faye is new, sure. Dromai is new, sure. But again, the time frame that it has taken, we already know these decks. You don't think people have tried them. You don't think people have theory crafted and know full well that they do not stand up to Bravo. They did not stand up to these other decks, and then these decks didn't stand up to Bravo, right? It's this vicious chain, and there is no great way to capture the main concept of Living Legend. Again, to go back to Dice Commando's brilliant line here, right? The disconnect between what we want it to be, what we think it should be, and what it has to be because of all the cards that already exist. I think Flesh and Blood has been a fantastic testing ground of concepts and ideas, but it is now plagued by everything that has come out prior to the healthy state of the game, right? Again, they've worked to balance and refine through community testing. But because of that, we have all these cards out in circulation, all these cards that now have this spill-on effect to these larger concepts of the game. We see a departure from everything that Tales was, right? The talent system, the way that cards were introduced and meshed with one another. It is clear that LSS are going in a new direction for that. But yet we still have all these cards existing, all these cards in limbo through, again, the concept of the Living Legend system that we personally don't know what's going to happen, right? If LSS decide to revisit, to what extent do they mesh with the older cards of Aria? If Dusk Till Dawn is a prime example, then it's just going to be an alternative route, not actually something that builds on top of what already existed. I almost want to say, again, can everything that has come before it, right? Start again. Fresh ideas. Everything that has been developed from 2.0 is in such a better state, right? The Living Legend format that would have come out of Fab 2.0, I think would have been significantly healthier than this. Because again, these were from that initial era of testing where they were still working out the kinks of the game, still working on the balancing, on the design aspects, on the core concepts that they want for the game. And unless we get power crept back to that standard, it's just not going to work. They're going to continue to plague the game, just as much as Bravo is right now. Well, here we are again. Stravo, right? Depending on where you sit, he's either a nuisance or the pinnacle of the game. And currently, he is either plaguing or the representation of Living Legend, right? You probably know where I stand, given the previous video. Now, I do want to sort of broaden our topic of discussion, not just Stravo, right? Stravo is definitely a factor that we're going to talk about, but overall, has LSS shot themselves in the foot in terms of Flesh and Blood, right? There are a lot of great things going on conceptually for the game, a lot of new innovations. Again, Flesh and Blood is a new take on a TCG, right? It has a lot of different systems and concepts and ideas being melded together to try and create a new thing, right? It's not a cookie cutter of any existing TCG. It doesn't stick to any of the normal rules of product, right? We don't have the standard rotation. We have a whole new system created for Flesh and Blood through the Living Legend system. And then we have the spill-on effect from the Living Legend system to the Living Legend format and what it is meant to encapsulate and do. But altogether, all these great, fantastic concepts, they weren't rigorously tested, right? They were tested through the community. Flesh and Blood has been an epitome of creativity. LSS has done whatever they want, whenever they want, and that's fantastic, right? Again, to see unbridled passion and, again, creativity towards their game is phenomenal. But it has created numerous inconsistencies and uncontrollable variables. So again, I ask, has LSS shot themselves in the foot? Not just with the Living Legend format, but with the scope of the game going forward. We have the 15, 16, whatever it is, new heroes coming out in a year. And it's meant to do so much for the game. But what will it actually do, right? What is it leading towards? And is it enough? Is it too little? Is it worth it? Or is it just more inconsistencies, more variables, more fuel to the growing fire of Flesh and Blood? I don't mean that in a bad way. Again, Flesh and Blood is ripe for uncontrollable, numerous amounts of growth in any direction you could possibly imagine, right? What it is in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years, could be drastically different to what we think it is today. Again, that is exciting, that is interesting, that is hype-worthy. But it is still a lot to manage, a lot for LSS to manage and build around and off of. Again, we get 15 new heroes. They come to the Living Legend system. They're meant to help correct it, to help balance it, to help create something fresh and exciting. But what will actually happen? Sure, 1, 2, 5, 10, half, a third might be decent, might be playable, might be contenders, might, sit somewhere high on the board. But some will sit at the bottom. They will sit there doing nothing. Because while conceptually they might be great, LSS might think they're the bee's knees, right? The best hero that they have ever designed. It's not up to them what gets played. It's not up to them what actually rises to the top. It's on the community. It's what the community values, what the community thinks is actually going to work. LSS gives us the keys. They point us down the corridor, but they don't tell us what door to open. We decide that. We, the community. And that, again, while fantastic, is a numerous amount of inconsistencies and variables for LSS to work around. The 15 new heroes we get, say they are spread across 9 classes, right? We'll go 6, 6, 4, whatever you want for the 3 sets coming out, right? And it's always trio of classes. So 9 classes get support, 9 classes get new heroes. Fine. Classes that already exist, talents that already exist. None of them are expanded upon. All we're adding is numerous pathways to the game to sit and wait until they're retouched on and explored. Nothing is grounded, nothing is contained, everything is open-ended. Every new mechanic, every new system, every new card, right, is a start, not an end. And that is insane to think about, right? It is Yu-Gi-Oh! On steroids to me. And how many years did it take for Yu-Gi-Oh! To get to where it is? And we have done this gauntlet in 5 years for Flesh and Blood. So it's not just Stravo plaguing the game. I am at this point where it's the design choices. Again, sacrificing these consistencies, the ability to know what to make, what to revisit, and what to do for passion and creativity. Conceptually is fantastic. Just like a lot of the concepts of Flesh and Blood. They are fantastic ideas that we can really get behind, that we can fall in love with. But they're just not practical. And that is exactly what Bravo is. A great concept, but horrible in its actual existence. Because it has so many spill-on effects that were not foreseeable, that could not be predicted or planned around, that have to be adapted to on the fly. And that is just not how a physical production works, right? LSS can't just think up what Bravo needs, what X hero needs to combat Bravo, and have it out by next week. The problems that have been created, the problems that have been found out, are years away from fixing with the current attitude of LSS. That is my personal opinion. Again, James White has openly said he does not want targeted restrictions. That is the clear and easiest and simplest way to handle the Bravo situation. The only other concepts that work are either numerous amounts of expansion on existing heroes, which again is not looking like the pathway traveled. We're getting new, we're getting fresh, we're getting different ideas, different cards, different mechanics that will exist within the space of X class, X hero, but do their own thing. Meaning the synergy between whatever new brute we get and the old brutes might be 50-50, 70-30. It's unknown. And again, while LSS can think and can try to predict, as soon as it comes into existence, it is ripe with inconsistencies, ripe with variables to be exploited and to cause issues further on. Dice Commando left a very, very important line on my previous Bravo video. I honestly believe a lot of disconnect comes in what players want / believe the LL format to be versus what it basically has to be. Now, I'm going to take this a step further. I'm going to split all three, right? What we want a concept to be, what we believe the concept should be, and what the concept has to be. And that doesn't just revolve around the Living Legend format, revolve around Bravo and all those issues. it revolves around every concept of the game. Again, Flesh and Blood is not grounded. There are numerous pathways to be explored, and we have an idea of what we want the game to be, what we believe the game should be, but then there is what the game has to be, because that is what currently exists. The further down we get, the further everything becomes plagued by what already exists. Again, Bravo already exists, so anything that comes out has to deal with Bravo. But then if it deals with Bravo, its spill-on effects to every other aspect of the game becomes an issue. And that concept goes further. Again, what heroes they choose to expand upon, what classes they determine to revisit, if they retouch talents, what classes they combine together. These are innumerable amounts of different branches to create. Again, we have duo class cards. Who's to say that in a year we go from Guardian Brute to Guardian Ninja, or some weird, insane combination that we didn't think would exist, but has always never been off the table. There are just so many concepts that could one day exist in Flesh and Blood that it is just becoming cancerous. And I know the general thought when you hear the word cancer is, oh no, that's so bad, that's horrible. We have a ton of rampant cell growth, right? Not everything is an issue, right? It can be benign, right? But it is cancerous. It is an enormous amount of growth that can go in any random direction, and not just the directions that LSS have planned. We're getting 3 sets in a single year, bringing 16 new heroes. I believe it's 16. Again, I heard 15, but I keep seeing people say 16. 15 or 16, doesn't matter. That amount of new over those 3 sets means that we are not getting a huge amount of expansion to everything that already exists, because those heroes in themselves need a solid foundation, need a great cohort of cards. But then we also need the cards for all the fluff, for the filler, for drafting. And again, it's this enormous amount of concepts that have to be packaged in to Flesh and Blood that I can't help wonder how long before it becomes a struggle for even LSS? How long before their passion and creativity, hits a wall? How long before they have to backtrack and they have to correct these old pre-existing mistakes? And it's great if they don't want to take the easy way out, but it's hard then to know when something will come into existence, something that actually has a meaningful impact across the board and isn't designed solely around one concept. You go to the format page for Flesh and Blood, right? The numerous amount of formats that seem to be growing. UPF, Commoner, Shapeshifter, I didn't even know that was a thing, right? Blitz. Then we have Class Constructed, Living Legend, Team events. And I assume more stuff is going to come, right? You can add PvE to the list. You can add all these different fun formats. You can add all the limited formats. And this is insane to me. For 5 years of existence, to already have all this in the works, it leaves me dumbfounded. Because I can't think, where are we going? We're going down Class Constructed, okay. Is it actually going to have a full directed impact on Class Constructed? Or is it going to be for this, that, or whatever? And it's insane. 3 sets does not seem like it can do this. 3 sets does not seem like we can get the amount of growth we need across the board in a proper time frame. Again, 15 new heroes, 16 new heroes. Wonderful. But that leaves everyone else in the dust. Leaves them stale and what they are. Sure, they might get 1 or 2 cards that come into play. The expansion slot is always in play. But how long for X hero? We're just adding, again, more to the pile of how long to revisit this. The cards that have Living Legend, right? Are they just going to always stay the same? They're going to have cards directed towards them. There's just so much to wonder about? Well, this is like the 5th or 6th time that I'm trying to record this topic of discussion, right? Living Legend, Stravo, everything that we've been discussing of late. And yeah, it has not been going my way. Basically, I don't have a script, so I just sit down, I just record, and I let my thoughts come out, and wherever they go, they go. And if I get off topic, well, I generally start again. I don't like editing, so I literally just re-record the segment until it's on point and on topic. But we'll try and do this concisely. Living Legend will never, ever be meaningful, right? That's my honest, absolute opinion. Without some sort of pressure, influence, outside presence, whatever you want to call it, the Living Legend format in its current state will continue to struggle to be meaningful. So what is the big issue? Well, it's never going to be anything different, right? The heroes that we have always been in competition with one another, right? Bravo dominated everyone else on the list. Everyone else on the list dominated everyone else in Classic Constructed. That's how it's always going to be. The new heroes that come out from this year, maybe a handful of them rise to the top, right? Okay, they've dealt with everyone in Classic Constructed. Now they have to deal with everyone in Living Legend. Everyone who is already, again, significantly more powerful than their predecessors. So without, outsider influence, without a restrictive force that is a lot more solid than what we're seeing LSS implement, the Living Legend format will struggle to have any meaningful presence within the game of Flesh and Blood, just because there is no great way to create a fun and interesting dynamic, because it will always just be the same thing over and over again. It will always be the same matchups and the same conclusions, right? Again, Bravo came out after all of these heroes. Yes, they've gotten new cards. Yes, there's been tweaks and refinement to their decks. But Bravo dominated them then, and he's dominating them now. They dominated everyone else, and as soon as Faye, Dash, Dromai hit Living Legend, they'll come against the same roadblocks they have prior. Because we've already played this whole entire format out. There is nothing new to discover. And with the current design choices of LSS, the amount of change needed to create interest within the Living Legend format, I just don't think is going to happen. So what I mean by that is a whole bunch of new cards hitting the field and just revitalizing these decks, right? For that to happen means that the sets that come out that focus on these classes need to be solely focused on these heroes. It's highly doubtful that they focus on the Living Legend heroes, because again, it's not conducive to Classic Constructed. In the way of Prism, New Prism is a completely different playstyle. Same with Visette and Chain. So the new cards that we are getting aren't impactful enough to the heroes that have hit Living Legend. Therefore, it's not reinvigorating those decks, right? And bringing something new to the table for them to then test off against Bravo and try to actually contest him. And again, because of that design aspect, right? What we're seeing with Heavy Hitters so far, we're getting new ideas for all the classes. Yes, there's going to be some crossover, but we're getting new concepts and new foundations for the new heroes that they are implementing. Meaning that it's not necessarily expanding upon what already exists in the game. It is just creating more and more concepts to juggle and balance. Concepts that are going to have a hard time competing with one another, especially when the current power level of the game is definitely, right, lower than this era of the game. Monarch through Everfest is very clear that was the strongest the game ever was in terms of a design aspect. So unless we get everything power creeping back to that level, it doesn't matter when they hit Living Legend. Now, let's use two examples from Heavy Hitters, right? We have Olympia, the new warrior hero, and we have the new version of Luminaris, right? So, Olympia, his whole ability revolves around gold, meaning there are two routes they can take. Either his signature weapon requires gold to use, right, which is one way to go, but it heavily locks that weapon to Olympus, or they come out with a whole bunch of warrior skills that use gold, right? Either of those examples make all of their utility solely for Olympus. If it's just reliant on their draw aspect, right, then again, that's a different playstyle to every other warrior. So it just creates a weird dynamic. It's not going to really further the game plan of the other warriors as much as those cards are just going to be devoted to Olympia. Then in the case of Luminaris, does Luminaris, Angel's Glow is the new version, does that in any way stack up to old Luminaris? Exactly. And even with Olympia, say gold is just strictly there to make him this generic warrior, right? Well, it still creates this different pathway to these other weapon-specific warriors. So again, the conversion of all cards across every single warrior does create this branched system. And then we also have that time aspect. Any hero that comes out, it's not going to hit Living Legend within the year. If it does, then it's broken and we'll have other issues because that's not conducive to class constructed, right? The 15 heroes we get are going to slot into this table. Some are going to end up down here, unplayable until they see a high level, a high degree of expansion, right? We're getting a great item for Prism. Do I think that's going to make Prism rocket to the top? No. It might allow Prism to start gaining points, but it's definitely not going to skyrocket from that little bit of expansion. And same goes for all the 15 new heroes. Some will naturally slot higher because of their inbuilt abilities and the way they work in relation to everyone else in the game. And then some will drastically fall short because while they might be fun and interesting ideas, they just don't suit the playstyle of the game. Right? Going for these big things like Teklovos and Max, it's very clear that they don't work. They're too slow. And 15 heroes, they're not all going to be at the top. They're not all going to be at the bottom, sure, but they're just going to be slot everywhere. And that's just not going to be meaningful. We're at a point where they're trying to flood it with quantity so that X heroes rotate out. By the time these other heroes rotate out, it's all new and we can get those interesting matchups that we haven't seen before. We can have a new contestant come into Living Legend and try to usurp the heroes that have been dominant. And that would be fine. That's a great thing to work towards. It's just too slow. Their time frame of 8 months to 2 years for a hero is very apparent. If they try to speed that up, that's fine, but it's still going to be too slow, and I can't see it being as meaningful as it should. And I don't really see a salvageable way for Living Legend as long as everything else already exists. There's a clear case where everything needed to be so finely balanced to make the Living Legend work without a rotational system, without a set time frame for heroes to leave. All the variability, right, is being used up in class constructed through the aspect that, again, heroes come in and they can take anywhere between X and Y to actually leave the format. And during all that time, we have this huge mix of heroes that have existed since the inception of Flesh and Blood to the most recent set, right? The whole amalgamation of these different generations battling out is dealt with in class constructed that I don't think can ever meaningfully translate to Living Legend. And that is just my overarching problem with Living Legend currently. While it is a fantastic concept and idea, it just does not have the systems in place to be meaningful. It is a wonderful concept, but in its practicality, it just is non-existent. Again, to me, the main concept is we get those generational heroes. Heroes that existed for a time, hit Living Legend. We have the top of that generation for Living Legend. Then we get the new season. We get a new generation of heroes from that, the cream of the crop, hit Living Legend, and they now contest the older generation. But that's not what we see, because again, 15 heroes are going to come out. They're going to push some of the older heroes even further down this list. And it's just going to be this weird dynamic of we never know who's going to leave. We don't know when they're going to leave. And therefore, we don't know what impact they will have on Living Legend and if it will actually be meaningful to the ongoing lifespan of Living Legend. Again, the short-sighted response is everyone wanted to replay Bravo. That is not going to last forever. Well, if you made it this far, what do you think? But in watching all of that back, right, in editing, I think what stands out apparent to me is I don't want to be part of the mentality anymore of worrying about the future and then not being able to enjoy the present when it comes to the game. Because again, I do really enjoy Flesh and Blood and I like Flesh and Blood, but all this discussion, all this thinking about the prospects, all it leads me to do is when I see, a new type of card like the universal keyword or even blocks, all I see is, well, that's just another type of card, right? We already have this plethora. We already have this lack of synergy between the different archetypes of cards. And now we're adding more to that, right? We're adding block. We're adding universal that could openly power creep any card in the generic slot. And again, I don't want to have to worry about it anymore. I want to go, oh cool, universal. That's a fun concept. Means I can slot into so many decks and have it work off of their ability. I can tutor this card, right? I want to have those thoughts and feelings towards the game. So I think I'm going to make a overall shift from what we do discuss on the channel in relation to Flesh and Blood. And I do think I'm going to not concern myself so much with the competitive side of the game. Again, I like the mechanics, I like playing it, but I like playing it for fun. I'm not here to try and win major events. I'm not here to try and win any games, in all honesty. If I can get a cool combo off, that is the exciting thing to me. That is the fun to me. I think that's pretty much where I'm at the moment. And then in trying to, sum up the discussion I was trying to convey through all those different takes, I think the biggest takeaway is, again, just how much are we sacrificing for creativity versus proper meaningful growth of the game. Again, 15 new heroes is fantastic. It's exciting, right? Again, it's that pursuit of passion and creativity, but it doesn't do anything for that which already exists, right? There might be a few cards that cross over, but again, the majority of the set needs to be devoted to its draftability, so they can sell boxes, so it can actually have a use other than just opening and collecting, and then also serving as the foundation for the new heroes. We can use bright lights, right? Conceptually. Again, a lot of it was devoted to building up the new heroes. And because of that, I don't value the 3 sets we're getting as an impactful amount of growth towards the game, right? The growth that is probably necessary. Again, giving all these decks better toolkits so that even in Living Legend, they put up more of a fight is this easiest, simple solution if you don't want to ban, you don't want to restrict, you don't want to errata or anything, is to help build everyone up to the same standard without, just directly printing a new hero to power creep. But that needs a lot of cards, a lot of focus on these different already existing aspects of the game, and it just doesn't feel like that's the direction we're heading, right? We very, very minorly touch on that which already exists, even anytime we revisit, right? The examples, again, Bright Lights, even Dynasty onto Uprising and Still Dawn. They felt like adjacent systems. They didn't feel like direct development. And even for the heroes that it was direct development, was most likely because those characters were already underdeveloped, right? Arachne was by far the weakest hero in terms of card development, and I guess its card pool to come into existence. That's why it saw a great amount of devotion in the following sets. But past all that, we're at the point where, again, the large portion of a set is devoted to the new, rather than expanding on the old. And while the expansion slot does serve that purpose, I personally think that the expansion slot is way too minor, way too underutilized. Should be a larger portion of every given set, so that it can have meaningful development for everyone that already exists. Again, we're almost doubling the heroes, the current heroes of Classic Constructed. If we see the same growth next year, I really worry for what already exists, because it always seems like we're just chasing the next new thing and leaving whatever exists in whatever iteration. It gets minor support, but I wouldn't say it gets truly meaningful support, right? There's a great difference in the level of support heroes get. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. A little something different. I don't have to edit at all. I don't have to rewatch them all and decide which take is the best take. And happy holidays. See ya.